Well, we continue with this one now. For more on the withdrawal of South African diplomats from Israel, we're now joined by Mametlwe Sebei, who is the president of the General Industry Workers Union of South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us. I think initial reactions yesterday morning, we hear from the Minister of the Presidency that Cabinet decided to withdraw our diplomats. What was your initial reaction?
It was that obviously this is a step in the right direction. But we do think that it is wholly inadequate. It comes against the background of many years of campaigning by Palestinian solidarity movement in this country, intensification of mass rolling actions in the past 2 weeks in which GIUSA participated along SAF2, the BDS, and many other organizations and communities within the Palestinian solidarity movement. But also we think that this action is simply not proportionate to the gravity of the situation on the ground. Even South African government itself says there is actually a genocide that is rapidly developing. And if you look at that, these measures are simply not enough.
So what then would have been appropriate in your view?
We want the severing of ties completely with Israel. The Israeli ambassador in this country should have been dismissed and should have been expelled long time ago. His whole embassy must also be terminated. We want prosecution of all the mercenaries of the Israeli state. That is, those South Africans who are participating in the Israeli military. And we want the National Prosecuting Authority to implement the Prohibition of Mercenary Act, which does not allow South Africans to participate in mercenary activities. And we see Israeli army of occupation and settler colonialism in Gaza, or of course in West Bank and other Palestinian areas as nothing more than that. More than that, we're also demanding expropriation of all Zionist cooperations in this country, including those that have taken over key industries like clover in the case of Milko, which operate on the Palestinian, on the Jewish settlement on Palestinian land. We want those measures because the situation is very grave. I mean, the latest shows that, over 10,000 Palestinians lost their lives. 73% of them are women and children. And this is against the background of a government which, through an aerial bombing campaign, it has dropped 18,000 tons of bombs over 650,000 square kilometers of densely populated areas, which has wiped out families. Over 900 Palestinian families have ceased to exist from the face of the planet because of this campaign and so on. This in a situation wherein 300,000 homes have been bombed, leaving many people injured, and hospitals have been bombed, churches and all places of refuge, including those that are hosted by United Nations, including those that Israel has demanded that people, particularly in north of Gaza, must relocate to. They have been bombed.
Yeah, it's quite interesting for me though that as a labor organization, right, as the General Industry Workers Union of South Africa, that you would take such a stance, and I'm keen to hear why. Even while you've got pundits and criticism essentially saying that this move by South Africa could have very damaging economic consequences for the country. I mean, I'm just trying to look up just some of the value of trade between Israel and South Africa, and the numbers that come up as of 2021 are staggering. Right, we're talking about the main products exported from South Africa to Israel: coal briquettes to the value of $101 million. That's of 2021. Diamonds at $77.5 million. Grapes at $10.6 million. These are, and we're talking about little parts of some of those agreements that we have with Israel. So, how do you then explain that when we say, well, you're labor, but you're also saying that that's what we need to do? We need to cut and sever all ties.
I mean, it is an indictment that you have people in this country who have come out of, apartheid within the living memory, telling us that, 1, 2, 3 jobs is worth, thousands of the lives of the Palestinians. We demanded the world to implement sanctions, boycott, and divestment against apartheid, which, let's recall, in the worst massacre it ever committed in this country, right? In the worst massacre it ever committed in this country, in Sharpeville, only 69 people died. We are talking over 10,000 people here. And let's talk about the economic benefits. I mean, in fact, the most interesting figures have also come in relation to AGOA. And we know that there are senators in the US who want AGOA, South Africa no longer to be eligible. Even that we have rejected. Because when you look at AGOA, even the numbers that they are saying actually benefit South African workers, that program is not about jobs and alleviation of poverty, but the imperialist agenda of the US. Look at who it benefits. 75% of the benefits of AGOA goes to auto industry, 12% to smelters. These are industries that are owned and monopolized by United States and its allies. In the case of auto industry, it is the American car manufacturers, the Japanese, the Germans, and of course, in the case of smelters, it's an Australian smeltering companies and so on. These are companies, by the way, that are already heavily subsidized by South African government at a cost to taxpayers. In the case of auto industry, in 2018 alone, they received subsidy to the value of, I think, of about 27, if not 32 billion rand. I'll check the figure. But according to World Bank report, it says in 2016, for every job we have in the auto industry, government is spending 115,000 rand in subsidies, which otherwise could go to creating jobs in the public sector, in improving our public infrastructure, and of course, under public ownership in ensuring that there's real manufacturing of vehicles, which is not what is happening, but assembly.
Yeah, it's not surprising that, of course, this would turn into an economic discussion. I mean, this was bound to happen, especially when we start talking about, trade relations between Israel and South Africa. One of the things, and you touch on AGOA as well, one of the things that Minister Ntshabeni spoke about just a few moments ago when we spoke to her was the need for us, even in the confirmation of the AGOA agreement, really starting to look at investing in beneficiation, right, of all the various industries within South Africa, and particularly for the African continent. But that too requires a significant amount of investment in industrialization, right? I mean, can African states, and South Africa particularly, afford to sever ties that might very well impact the speed at which they industrialize?
Absolutely. I mean, let's look at the auto industry as an example of that. I already told you, like, for every single job, which is the argument here, South African government is spending 115,000 rand. This is not from me, but the World Bank report in 2016. Since then, they've increased the benefits and, of course, subsidy to auto industry massively. And the auto industry is not satisfied. It wants more. In fact, in the latest demand, they want South African regime or government to subsidize them to the tune of about 80,000 rand per vehicle. That is what it costs us. And what are they doing? They are not engaged in manufacturing. They are engaged in assembling. There is no, engine of BMW and so on that is being made in this country. And given the hundreds of billions of South African rand, of South African taxpayers' money that is being spent on that industry, who would argue? Take that industry through nationalization into public ownership, and on the basis of democratic control and management of the working class, it will be entirely possible for us not only to ensure that we have an industry through a repurposing that is able to manufacture, right? Environmentally sustainable and cheap public transportation for many working class people in this country. I'm talking buses, I'm talking trains, I'm talking, trams and all these things and so on, that many working class people in this country need, and ensure that in so doing, we will not only be able to preserve the existing jobs, we'll also be able to grow and increase the number of jobs in that industry, in addition to ensuring that it's geared towards serving the working class, which is spending about 30% of their income in transport. But also, AGOA has sacrificed many other industries. You know that in exchange for duty-free access for auto industry, which is owned by the very same Americans, they demanded a reduction of tariffs on chicken imports from the US. The end result of which is that the poultry industry, which is the only local industry, by the way, of many of them, including small and medium-sized enterprises
Yes.
was laid to waste and at the cost of tens of thousands of jobs and livelihoods across the country.
Yeah.
That is the real cost of the imperialist agenda and the AGOA scheme in this country.
Okay. The diplomats are going to come back into South Africa from Tel Aviv. They then go into consultations. That's what we're hearing from Minister in the Presidency. And you say, well, the withdrawing of diplomats from Tel Aviv simply isn't enough. What do you want to see next?
Like I've said, we want, we want Israeli ambassador and his own embassy to go. We want prosecution of all South Africans who participate in the Israeli army under the prohibition of mercenary activities, act in this country. We want expropriation of all Israeli companies that, of course, are linked in particular with the Israeli regime, who are enabling its occupation, right, the siege of Gaza, but also the genocidal campaign that Israel is carrying out. We want, South African government to be supporting more of the resistance of the Palestinian people. Yeah. And I think for us, we are not just going to sit and make these demands. We are going to intensify our action. To the best of my knowledge, SABC has a campaigns committee meeting today. We would raise an issue of how do we have a unified campaign of SABC, but also of the whole labor movement alongside Palestinian solidarity movement and many communities that stood by us in ensuring that we press these demands. We agree on the rolling actions up until that South African government meet all our demands.
All right. Well, we do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for speaking to us. That was Mr. Mametlwe Sebei, who is the president of JIUSA, which is the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa.